Imagine sitting in a classroom where chaos reigns. Kids are fidgeting, tapping, zoning out. The teacher's voice fades into the background. And focus, it's like nowhere to be found. Does that sound familiar? Now, if you're a parent of a child with ADHD, you know this struggle all too well. But what if the key to focus wasn't actually sitting still, but moving? Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Hello parents, this is Dana Kay here with another edition of the Soaring Child podcast. Now, if you've ever felt frustrated trying to help your child focus, whether it's at school, whether it's at home, you guys know you're not alone. But today we're going to be talking about a game-changing approach that really sort of flips the script on ADHD and focus. My guest, Rob Owen, is a former school principal and mindfulness-based movement expert. He is going to share simple science-backed movement strategies that can really help your child calm their nervous system, regulate their emotions, and improve their focus. I mean, who doesn't want all of that? These are easy to implement tools that can make a huge difference, whether you're a parent or a teacher. So stick around because this episode is packed with actionable insights you don't want to miss. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to talk about this, and I just remember back in the day when my son was struggling with ADHD. And the reports that we used to get from the school, he was tapping, he was singing, he was up and down. But let's just start with your journey. It's kind of incredible. Can you sort of take us back to your car accident at the age of 17 and how it really led you to discover the power of Tai Chi and Qigong?
Yeah, sure. It was a while back. I was 17, and I was almost killed in a car accident, and it was rough. I had 200 stitches in my face. Luckily, I had the best plastic surgeon in the country who was in the hospital, stitched me up. About a month later, I went back to school, and it was about a year and a half later where my back started locking up, my neck started locking up. And I didn't know what was going on. It took a while for the trauma to kick into my body. It wasn't much longer after that, the emotional aspects of it, the psychological aspects of it. Long story short, by about 19, I was in really bad condition, going through chiropractors, doctors, acupuncturists, and all. During the time previously, I had been training in martial arts and different martial arts, Eskrima and Filipino martial art, and I'd also been reading a lot about the Tao Te Ching, so the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, and I also had a fascination with Bruce Lee. Put all those together, and I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to reach out to a place that teaches Chinese martial arts. So I did what they do in the movies. I left a little note under the Sifu's door and teach me, teach me, Sifu, teach me.
Did you
I
really?
swear I did it. And and I got the call, come, let's meet up. And I started training, and year after year, my body started to get stronger and stronger. All the core parts and all of the nonlinear musculature that needed development started to develop. 10 years later, I was teaching it. I was practicing Shaolin, Tai Chi, and Qigong mostly. And little did I know, I didn't really figure it out until I consciously started to read a little bit more about ADHD and how my brain works, that I was also refining my energy. It wasn't just my body. So I was refining my philosophical roots as a martial artist, but then also my body as a fighter and my musculature, but then also my energy. And I found that embedded in Tai Chi and Qigong are tools to develop a refinement of your energy. And so here we are today. We talk about energy, we talk about whatever aspects have to do, and connect with ADHD, but to learn to refine your energy and impulsivity is what I found. And yeah, I'll stop there because there's a lot to the story.
No, well, I mean, that journey, and as a 17-year-old to go through that,
Hmm. Hmm.
but then to come full circle in that not only helping your physical body, but also helping your, emotional body
Hmm.
and your mental body. And so, um, fascinating though, I want to understand the connection of where you were then to then becoming a school principal. Like I know that you've
Hmm.
worked, you were a school principal, you've worked with
Hmm.
teachers and students for
Hmm.
over 20 years.
Hmm.
So how do those two things connect?
Yeah, yeah. So I spent some years as a head of school and many years as an educator.
Mm,
So the way I usually describe how I connect it is this. So I've been an educator for 23 years, and I had a class that it was 10 boys. I'm working at a school that we emphasize neurodiversity.
mhm,
So they basically gave me 10 boys. About seven of them had hyperactive ADHD. A couple had inattentive ADHD. A couple had dyslexia, dyscalculia, all the above. And the eighth grade boys bouncing off the walls, right? So they said, okay, let's just give them to the guy with the gray beard. Let's see if he can figure them out, right? So after about a week or two of the honeymoon phase teaching, it was just nuts in the classroom. It was just crazy. Kids bouncing off the wall, couldn't focus, just what everyone all knows so well. All of your listeners know that so well. So I decided to take them out every morning to do
mhm,
some practice, to do some Tai Chi and Qigong. And slowly, well, at first, I'm going to be honest, at first they didn't buy into it. That's slow. That's for old people. That's this. So some of the kids at this age needed to see more of the martial side,
mhm,
right? More of they want to learn how to punch and kick. So we did a few exercises that way. And then one day I brought to them, hey, what if we slowed it down a little bit? And they're like, okay, let's try slowing it down. And then we started to slow it down. And Tai Chi fundamentally is a martial art. And so then I started to bring in the Tai Chi and the Qigong to them. And they started to like it.
mm,
I would bring them out every morning, and then I would have teachers come up and stand behind us and kind of mimic us in our movements and what we're doing. At the same time, admin came in and said, "What are you doing with these boys? Like, what is this? This isn't yoga." Well, yeah, this is Tai Chi and Qigong. And we already had like a mindfulness in our school, so it wasn't too far off. Um, and so I brought it into the classroom and been practicing since then. And luckily, there was a lot of engagement with the parents as well. And the school started to create classes around it.
wow.
And then I started venturing off into entrepreneurial pursuits and training, faculty, educational faculty, mostly K-12.
Yeah, wow. I love to see how it's definitely come full circle.
Oh yeah.
Now, what are some of the, when you were a teacher, where you were in the school environment, what were some of the biggest struggles that you would see in the
Hmm.
classroom when it came to sort of focus, stress, emotional regulation?
You mean when I'm introducing the kids
No,
or?
more about what are the biggest struggles that you saw in the
Oh,
classroom
oh.
before you introduce that.
Yeah, so classroom management.
Mm,
So just classic, what we all know, like, inattentiveness, impulsivity, sounds, blurting, lots of extra body energy,
mm.
all of the things that we know so well that are parts of ADHD. Yep.
And so, as a parent who is, just starting out on this journey, or who has a child that is really, really struggling in the classroom with those issues, just like you mentioned,
Hmm.
they might look at movement and think, well, that's like counterintuitive, like
Hmm.
that's seen as a distraction,
Hmm.
but your approach really flips that idea on its head. So,
Yes.
can you sort of just dive into the fundamentals? How does this mindful movement
Mhm.
actually help improve focus?
Right. So fundamentally, when you have kids with ADHD or what present as ADHD and you have them sit still, well, you know what happens. right? Eventually something's going to pop. The foot's going to start moving, the mouth's going to start moving, the body's going to start moving. It's just natural. So the idea, not to be too cliche, is to kind of go with the flow,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and so why not turn it around and teach them how to control their bodies through mind and breath and utilize that, what they already have, but simply slow it down. The idea is if you start from the inside out trying to slow the mind down from the mind, it's probably not going to work. It's an ever elusive thing. You start to slow down the mind through the body by slowing the body down first and slowing the breath down. The mind will follow, right? So it's like embracing the movement, but offering a specific form of movement for the kids or adults to do to place all that extra energy in. And then it's a slow refinement of that movement.
I love that
Mhm,
because I know, back in the day when I was trying to teach my son
mhm,
uh, how to calm his body,
mhm.
or do mindfulness, he'd sit there and like, this is so
Oh,
boring.
yes.
But I can
Yep.
totally see
Yeah.
the concept of like, well, if they're moving with it
Mhm,
and then
mhm,
learning to slow that down, you can see how that could be so successful, not only at home, but obviously in the school environment as well. So
mhm,
what would you say are some simple movement based mindfulness strategies that parents can use at home, to help
mhm,
their child calm down and refocus? Because I know, and I will tell you, a lot of what I hear from parents, it's like, especially in the afternoon when they come home from school, they've got to sit down for their homework.
mhm.
What are some of those simple strategies they can implement?
Right, right. So there's different places to start. It depends on the individual, but I always just think breathe, move, and focus. So we all can do that naturally, right? So we all breathe, or we wouldn't be here today.
Mhm.
Most of us can move, and hopefully some of us can kind of focus. So it's all about aligning those three. So
Mm.
when you align those three, that's the goal. So the first one, what I start with is, I mean, I can do it on video if you want for you, or I can just talk about it. What would
You
you
can do,
prefer?
can you do both?
Yeah, yeah, let's do it right now.
We've
Okay.
got some people watching on YouTube. We've got some
Yes.
people listening on the podcast
Okay, I'll do
platforms.
my best to describe what I'm doing. So I'm standing up right now, um, and I'm going to move the screen here. So what I do is I just have the kids put their feet shoulder width apart. I have the adults do it. Their knees are slightly bent. Their breath is in their belly. Shoulders are gently relaxed. Chin is tucked, and the crown of the head is pointed upward, which causes the spine to elongate, right? Hands are just down normally. So we can start with like a hand on the heart, hand on the belly to make sure we're breathing on the inhale. Our belly is getting big on the inhale. So you inhale big, and then you exhale. Now the kids are already bored, right? So here's where you start to move, right? So when you inhale, you bring your hands up to about sternum, and then you exhale, just like this. And then your knees are bending on the way down. So now I'm standing up as I'm pulling my whole body up, and my knees are bending on the way down. So think of it as your whole body's breathing, right? So this is the first one. Aside from like, the immediate ones, like a box breathing, like a 4-4-6-2 box breathing, which you can have the kids do for super immediate things. It just starts with slowing down the body this way. So this is usually the first one that I teach, and it's so basic. Now, if they're little kids, that's what I was saying, it depends. If they're little people, maybe you wanted to teach them something out of the crane set, right? Because it's an animal. So in Qigong, we have animal-based movements. So you can kind of get a little bit more playful with the youngers, probably fourth grade and below.
Hmm.
They'll kind of buy into like a tiger or a crane form. The olders, when you get a little bit the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, you're going to want to move, keep them excited. Maybe animals, maybe something more martial, depends on the individual. And then once a little bit after high school, they have this um, possibility within themselves saying, you know what, this might actually benefit me. I'm just going to try it, even though I feel awkward and stupid, right? So it depends. And adults hopefully can just let it go and just and just do the movement, right? So anyway, getting back. So the first one is simply inhale here, right? This is the first one. The second one is to bring your hands all the way up this way, bringing your energy all the way up. Big, deep inhale and coming back down, right?
So it's
Just
like a
simple.
sun movement all the way up
Yeah,
to the
like a sun,
sky
just
and
simple.
then
And
down.
then down in front. And what's important, the most important, is the breath the movement and the focus have to be together. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just doing this, and it's not just breathing, but the movement. And where's the mind? The mind, for grounding, the mind is at the bottom of the feet,
Mm-hmm.
right? The mind is at the bottom of the feet, and the legs are slightly engaged, right? The mind can also be on the breath, so the feeling or the sensation right at where your nose is, or right about 3 inches below your belly button, where the dantian, we call that the dantian. So that's where the mind can be. And you just simply start, you can do this 3 to 5 times, and these are the movements. The first two that I usually start with this first one here with my right hand on the heart and the left on the dantian, which is about 2 inches below the navel. This is the first one, just to settle in. And then the second one is I usually bring up, and the third one's here. Now, it just depends. If you're going to start a class, or if you want a kid to chill, you can just say, hey, we're just going to do 3 of these, whatever it might be, and then you go back into what your pattern is.
Mm-hmm.
If you're training children or even at the house, you can do it. You want to attach it onto something else, some other thing. So whether it be brushing teeth, eating, whatever it is, you want to attach a movement right onto one of those already pre-made behaviors. What I teach to teachers, administrators, and other adults, honestly, is a morning practice, right?
Mm.
So it's like a practice that we do anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes, kind of, breakfast for the body mind, if you will. And that's what I really like to teach, because to start the day with mindful movement is really the way to go, instead of starting the day with, cup of joe, a donut, and whatever else happens.
Well, I love that, and they were just so simple, and you could do it anywhere. You totally answered where I was going with my next questions. Is
Mhm,
how can families and teachers sort of implement this into the daily practice? And what I'm hearing is starting it in the morning. I can
mhm,
see, like, even just you doing that and me watching you doing
mhm,
that, I feel calmer. So I can
mhm,
imagine the children doing it and getting ready for school,
mhm,
and allowing them to helping them, refocus.
mhm,
Now, what are some effective ways parents can really like school? We've got the traditional school environment, and it sounds
mhm,
like you've come from a more non-traditional school environment, which
mhm,
is the way I think every school should be.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so we would love teachers to incorporate these strategies, and I think it'll be super beneficial for them as well, not just their students. So what are some effective ways parents can really build a stronger, more collaborative relationship with their
mhm.
child's teacher, to better support their children, their learning and their emotional needs, and sort of, make suggestions like this to bring it into the
Oh,
classroom?
that's a very practical question. I like that. I would start with tuning into how the teacher works classroom behavior,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or classroom management. So a lot of times classroom management has to do with the teacher's capacity to. It's not about control. It's how to connect with the children first, and how to move them in a certain way so they're prepared to learn. We think of classroom management as like, well, back in the day, you needed to scare the kids to sit down and stay seated. It's either fear or guilt, right? So you want to tap into how the teacher's already doing that, and then bringing it to the teacher in a way that's not going to, well, kind of question their authority, if you will. So especially if the child's coming home and saying, Mom, Dad, my classroom's chaotic, or I can't get anything done, I'm not getting my work done. Then maybe that would be an introduction to say, hey, you know, this is what's happening in my son or daughter's class. Um, it would be a good idea too, is like, hey, I'm looking at great ways to help benefit my child to become more internally healthy, like healthy mentally. Like, do you have any support for that? Do you do that in the classroom? What do you do besides academic? Um, how do you support that part of the child, right? I'm a massive advocate about teaching the whole child, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a school that's just all about testing and scores in the whole left side of the brain, and that's all you got, that's all the child's going to get,
Mm.
right? So I would suggest sending out an email and just ask about wellness. How do you take care of my kid? Like, it's, there's different school rules and things like that around. I know your backyard is around food and nutrition. Can you bring about new rules and guidelines about, okay, um, I'd prefer, no dyes, no Gatorades, no dairy, like this kind of thing in the classroom so my kid's not subjected to that. That would be more healthy, but is that crossing the lines, right?
Mm.
And the same thing with the health and wellness. Hey, is there any way you can bring this really simple movement practice in? It's not that hard. I mean, honestly, I shouldn't. It can be very complex. Qigong and Tai Chi can be very complex, but the beginnings of it are absolutely not simple as pie. Would you be open to just trying something new, like these simple movements with breath, so I can help my child focus, and then we can transfer that, what you do in the classroom at home, and that would really support me as my child is working on their executive functioning or whatever they might be working on.
And in your experience, have you found that most schools are open to that?
It depends. Sometimes it's a hard sell because it's different, right?
Mm.
It's the schools that are already um, training their teachers in PD around yoga, because yoga is a lot more popular than Tai Chi and Qigong.
Mhm. Yep.
Qigong and yoga are both about 4,000 years old. They're kind of brother sister arts, one from India, one from China, right? But the Qigong and Tai Chi haven't necessarily been introduced to the school system like yoga has. There's some really big companies that have introduced that and have gotten it in because of the popularity. So in my experience, it's the schools that have already gone, oh, yeah, we have a yoga teacher, or we have a teacher who comes in and does this, or, oh, some of our teachers do yoga with the classes. Then it's not that far off. And it's just like, hey, this is very similar. This mindfulness practice is very similar, but the kids aren't going to sit on the ground, right? And if there's kids that have disabilities or whatever it is, this practice is for standing up,
Mm.
right? And introducing it that way.
No, well, thank you for those tips, because I know that, sometimes there are a lot of different school districts out there, and, some are more embracing, some are not as embracing. But I think, the moral of the story today is really, connecting the movement and the breath and the focus into one package to really help your child. And so, what are some tips that families or listeners can really do to sort of ingrain this in their child? Because even if they're not going to be able to get it into the school, they are still going to be able to help their child thrive in school. And so, what are some real, like, the top tips that parents need to know right now to start implementing this and to make them successful in bringing this into their child's life?
Yeah, so if you're a parent, I would say just to start is to start modeling it. So let's say the back door would be I'm thinking about your last question about these meeting the Castle SEL standards. I don't know if you guys use them at your child's school, but
No.
we could talk about that. We can touch base on that because my program does touch on the Castle standards, which are SEL program based standards, and it also touches on physical education standards, and
Mhm.
that helps get into the school system as well.
Okay.
Um, but going back to what you're saying, the most practical tips to kind of go in the side door would be like, hey, I'm watching this, depending on the child's age, right?
Mhm.
Like if it's a little person, third and under, maybe fourth and under, mom and or dad is hanging out and they're doing this cool video on YouTube. They're like, hey, look at, we're like, look what we're doing. You want to follow along? Something like that. That's a great way to kind of introduce that. Also, I work with little. I just call them little people because under thirds they're just um, you utilize what you have. So television shows and video games, right? Because that's what's on the ground. So you have Kung Fu Panda,
Mhm.
right? A very popular one. The kids say, "Hey, I know how to do that, Mr. Owen. You just go like this. I learned that, and that's what Kung Fu. Cool. Let's do that." Right? Or what's the other one? Avatar, right? Avatar, that cartoon Avatar actually utilizes very similar moves in Shaolin and same in the Tai Chi. And they say, hey, I had one student who always wanted to do water bending, right? Because that's what the Tai Chi person does, right? Because it's all about being like, what? Okay, hey, do you want to go? You want to go do some water bending? Let's do some water bending. So if you're able to relate these movements to a portion of the child's mind that is almost fantasy based, if you will, but
Mhm.
definitely they're already in their bodies. They love it. They're engaged, and then they're actually doing it. That's a great way to introduce it, at least to your kids.
No, for sure. It's all about getting it on their level.
Yep.
I want to ask, I assume consistency is the key here in doing it as
Always.
a yes. I know with anything, it's sort of like if you
Yeah.
do it once, you can't expect the results. But if you're doing
Oh no. Yeah.
amount every day,
Yeah.
I can see that this is a tool that a child can pull on naturally without even thinking about it if they're
Right.
getting stressed in the moment. You touched on box breathing
Yeah.
previously, but what are your sort of strategies? What are some effective ways that parents, when a child is in the moment, what
Mhm.
can parents use at home to really calm them down if they're having a big moment?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not about eating the pill.
Mm.
It's not about just like, here's your Ritalin, here's your Adderall. We're just going
Yeah.
to wait about a half an hour. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to work.
Yep.
So it's about consistency. I think for immediacy, I did mention box breathing because if you have a child running through a panic attack or
Mm.
a child who is completely upset to the point where they can't breathe, you're not going to go into, hey, let's slow everything down. No, you go immediately into breath. You go right into breath, and you need to regulate their autonomic nervous system back so then they can get themselves back together. And then maybe you can bring them out with some slow movement. Um, Outside of that, I would just start with those first two movements. That's about as pretty much as it's simple, about as simple as it gets. And a consistent practice is really key. So in the mornings, if you can even attach it. So with my child, I'm as consistent as I can. I have a 14-year-old with hyperactive ADHD, but in the morning, um, okay, hey, you got your stuff together. We're just going to do three. We're going to do three of these. Dad, we're just going to do three. We're just going to, and then sometimes we're just going to go for five. We're going to go for five today. And then it just grounds him. Little does he know, but it just grounds him. Right.
Mm.
So consistency is key, and attaching it to another behavior during the day in the morning is really important.
Fantastic. Well, I ask every guest this one question. If you
Mhm.
could just share one small actionable tip that parents can start using today,
Mhm.
what would it be?
One actionable tip, I would say model for your child because you're the one.
Mm.
Model mindfulness or mindful movement. Model gratefulness. Model kindness. Model. Within my practice, like what I was saying, if you were going to model something, it would be like start watching a video around this, start normalizing it. Just like we normalize stretching. Stretching, you could walk by your parent stretching, and it's like, oh, cool, they're stretching.
Mm.
Or like if they're sitting a certain way and doing a yoga pause, yoga posture, they might say, oh, they're doing yoga.
Oh,
Okay,
I love
so
that.
so how do we slowly regulate and bring this in? You know.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that, Rob. I am a 100% believer in that modeling. It's like we always ask families to start feeding their children better. And if they're
Mhm.
not doing the same
Yep,
thing, then how
it's
can we expect
never going
our
to happen.
children to do that? Rob, thank you
You're
so
so
much
welcome.
for sharing these powerful strategies with us. It is amazing to sort of see how something as simple, I know it's not simple as you said, but the starting parts are so simple. That movement, that breath, that focus together can make such a profound difference in helping our kids regulate their emotions and improve focus. So I want to thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. It was great to speak with you.
Can you share with listeners where they can find and follow you online?
Yeah, yeah. I of course have an Instagram, so it's move to focus. So move underscore and then the number two underscore then focus. You can find me there. Also movetofocus.com. And if you can email me as well as info@movetofocus.
Fabulous. Well, Rob, thank you once again for joining us.
All right.
Parents, if today's episode gave you a new or fresh perspective or a new tool to try, I really encourage you to start small. Start modeling, as Rob said. Maybe just, introduce one mindful movement exercise into your child's routine and see what happens. And if you found this conversation valuable, consider sharing it with your child's teacher. or another parent or anyone you think might benefit from these insights. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode filled with all of these expert strategies really to help your kiddo with ADHD thrive. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.